All right, guys, we are back with Project 4 Mil. Today we're going to be doing some pretty basic stuff. What we're going to be doing is putting on our primary drive gear, doing a leak down test, and going over some new parts that we got. All right, guys, so the primary idea of today's video is going to be doing a leak down test. A lot of you guys have been sending me comments on YouTube and sending me DMs on Instagram saying, you better be doing a leak down test on that Banshee motor. You know, you're an idiot if you don't do it. I'm going to do the leak down test, guys. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to show you exactly how I do it and everything. Now, the reason I have the primary drive gear out and the reason we're doing it when the motor is not fully assembled is because the portion of the motor that we're actually checking for air leaks is this front part of the motor. We have our top end and the bottom end portion where the crank is. It's separate from our gearbox, so we don't need to worry about getting the side covers on or anything like that. And as far as the sides of the motor, it stops right at the crank seal. So we don't need to have our side covers on. And this way, if I do have any leaks, it's going to be easier for me to address it. I'm not going to have to take apart the sides of the motor or anything like that. Hopefully that's not going to be an issue. So we will have to put our primary drive gear on. You can see around the crankshaft right here we have this nice gap, and the primary drive gear is going to fill that gap. Now, I do want to have a separate video on putting together the clutch side of the motor, but I want to put on that primary drive gear just for purposes of the leak down test. So first things first, let's get that primary drive gear on. All right, so we're on the clutch side of our Banshee motor. First thing you want to do is grease up the inside of your crank seal. I've already gone ahead and done that. Now, these keyways are notorious for having small air leaks. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of our anaerobic gasket maker and just put a tiny bead in that keyway. And then I'm also going to put some on the inside of our primary drive gear so that when we slide this thing on, it'll be nice and sealed. Okay, so that thin coat of gasket sealer is in there. I'm going to put our key in. When you push down, it's usually going to ooze out all the excess. Wipe that on the sides. You don't need very much. And now we'll push the primary drive gear in with this flat portion facing the crank. And just take your time with this. Sometimes these things can be stubborn. This went on no problem. Now we'll take our water pump gear and slide it on. Washer. And then we're going to swing on our nut. We're going to put just a dab of blue Loctite. I want to tighten up my primary gear right now, so I'm going to throw my clutch pack on. Now I can throw a soft aluminum nail in the gears here. And that's going to stop the crank from turning. And I'm going to tighten this down to 47 foot-pounds. Now I'll rewind this a little bit and get this nail out before we forget. And I'll take our clutch basket off because we're going to be doing that in a separate video. All right, so our primary drive gear is in place, easy enough to put on. So now all we have to worry about is these 6 holes right here. We have our intake ports, our spark plug holes, and of course our exhaust ports. So let's start with the easiest ones, and we're going to throw some spark plugs in our spark plug holes and plug those up. We'll spin in some brand new NGK BR8 ES plugs. And for those of you guys wondering, I have my plug gap set at 3/100ths of an inch. Okay, so now is when the actual leak down tester comes into play. Now, these are really simple to make. I made this one myself at a local hardware store. I'm not going to get into exactly how to make one of these. I know you guys have asked in the past. I might make an entirely separate video showing how to make one of these, but for now I'm just going to show the kit. You guys can buy these things online. They're pretty inexpensive. But anyways, I'm just going to go ahead and explain what these things do. Basically, you have these two rubber cups. These are going to seal off our exhaust ports. Simple enough. Tighten them down with a hose clamp. And then these plugs are going to go into our intake holes. You have a little Schrader valve here, so you can hook up some compressed air, or you can use a bicycle pump, doesn't really matter. And then we have our pressure gauge right here, and we're going to pump this thing up to about 7 pounds, and we'll see if it holds. So let's first get our exhaust ports sealed off. And now we'll put our fittings in for our intake boots. Want to make sure they're in there good so you don't have any leaks. And then we'll snug these down as well. Alright, let's cross our fingers, guys. Now, 7 foot-pounds is right below this first red line. So let's pump it up and see what happens. Right there. Now it looks like it has a very slow leak. Now it's no problem, guys. What I'm going to do is hit some of our known leaking spots with some Windex, and it should bubble up. Now the first thing I'm going to check are my fittings. Hopefully it's just one of those wasn't tight enough. And I'll check our Schrader valve, make sure we're not leaking around here, and our exhaust ports, all the common spots, and we'll see if we can find where this leak's coming from. So I'm going to charge it with a little bit of pressure and start spraying it down. Alright guys, so I found the leak. It's a best case scenario. It's up here on the spark plug. You'll see it start to bubble up here. It's bubbling up right now. But you see right here, there's some bubbles coming out. Put a little bit more pressure in here. You can see the bubbles popping up. Little tiny leak. So that's a really easy thing to fix. I'll pull that spark plug off, make sure it's nice and clean in there, and tighten it back down. And this time I'm going to tighten them down to 15 foot-pounds of torque. Alright, let's see what happens this time around. Hopefully that was our only leak. And looks like we still have a small leak. Alright, check this out, guys. I found the leak. 100% the culprit. It's leaking from the one lower crankcase bolt. So that should be an easy fix. I'm going to flip the case over and tighten that bolt down. So what's going on here most likely is around this stud up where the cases meet, there's probably just a tiny little spot that I missed, or it's just a little bit too thin and a little bit of air is getting out, running down this hole in the case and coming out next to the stud. Now luckily in this case, I think I can fix this just by putting a different bolt on here. And in this case, I wanted to show you guys, this is the standard nut that goes on the bottom of that stud. This is the OEM bolt. And I was using these stainless steel bolts. Now you can see these have these little kind of like lock washer type flanges, and air can escape through those. So what I did is I took another one and shaved it down, made it nice and smooth. So hopefully that nice smooth surface up against the smooth surface of the case. And I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of Yamabond on here and a drop of Loctite. That should seal the case up and we won't have to worry about it. We'll tighten this down to 20 foot-pounds. Might as well go around, check our other studs. Alright guys, so that should seal the motor. Let's give it a try. I can already tell just by looking at the gauge, it's not leaking. Perfect. No leaks at all. Okay guys, so let's give this another go. So there we are at about 7 pounds. So I'm going to yank that off and we'll let this thing sit. So it's been about 5 minutes and this gauge literally, I don't even think it's moved. I don't even think it came down at all. So this motor is good to go. I think we are free of any leaks. And I'm pretty happy about that. Alright, so we're good to go. That's all there is to doing a leak down test. I'm actually kind of happy that there were a couple leaks here so that I could show you how to search for those leaks. And we got really lucky here. I'm pretty surprised. I thought the leak was going to be either in this intake, maybe in the cool head, and I was really scared that it might be something in the case. And even though technically it was something in the case, it was something that we could address, and I think we're going to be perfectly fine. So that, guys, is why it's important to do a leak down test before you go any further with your motor, especially if the motor is completely out and you know, you're doing a bottom end and everything. Definitely do it on the bench, so that way if you have anything to address, it's easy enough to do. Now, if it's in the frame, you can still do a leak test. There's no problem at all. If you're just doing a top end and you didn't even take out the bottom end, you still want to do a leak test. Definitely a mandatory thing to do. You can see how easy it is. You don't need an air compressor or anything. You can do it with a bicycle pump. And like I said, if you don't feel like making one of these kits for yourself, they're available on eBay. I know South Texas Banshee makes a kit of his own. Really inexpensive. Definitely something that you don't want to skip out on. Now let's put this motor aside. And by the way, guys, this gauge still hasn't moved. This motor is airtight, man. So let's move on to some new parts. Alright guys, so we're not going to do our traditional unboxing where I pull it out of the packaging and everything like that because I really couldn't wait to open these things, so I just popped them open as soon as they came in the mail. Plus it's 1 in the morning and I'm tired as hell. So we're just going to get right into it. It's pretty obvious what these things are, and I know a lot of you guys are going to be excited about this. I know I'm excited about this. Just going to slide this right here to keep you guys in mind that this did come from DBC Racing. Want to give those guys a huge thank you because if it wasn't for them, really this wouldn't be possible. So I want to thank Steve from DBC Racing for these. Now, what we have are some 35mm PWKs. These boxes are freaking sweet, man. I'm telling you, when these things came in the mail, I just could not wait to open these up. So I figured I would at least take them out of this box and show you how these things come. Dude, carburetors are just freaking cool. So what we're going to be doing, and I did post this on my Instagram. If you guys haven't already, check me out. It's Michael Sabo 350. What we're going to be doing is a side-by-side comparison with the replica Keyens and the genuine Keyens. And I can tell right off the bat, the genuine Keyens are definitely a better build quality. I'm not saying that the replicas are bad. This just feels a lot better. The aluminum feels smoother. I don't feel any ridges or anything on any of the ports or anything like that. Plus you have the screw off top, which I really like. So let me grab one of the 34mm flat sides that's a replica, and we'll just do a quick side-by-side comparison. Boom. So there they are. And you can see right off the bat, they're very similar looking carburetors. if they both had the same, tops over their slide, the Keyin has this big screw-on design, whereas the replica has 2 screws holding the top of the carb on. I think if those were both the same and the same hoses, they would definitely look really, really close. But you can see the bowl is a little bit bigger on the Keyin. I mean, obviously it's a bigger carburetor. This is a 35 millimeter, 34 millimeter. But just the overall quality feels a little bit better on the Keyin. The aluminum feels smoother and everything, like I was saying. It just seems like a nicer carburetor overall. You can see it's got that Keyin right there on the side. There's really no mistaking a real one. I mean, if you don't know what you're looking at, somebody might think this is a Keyin. Some of the knockoffs even say Keyin on them. But really, where the difference is going to lie, and I know what you guys are interested in, is the performance, how easy it is to change the jets out, and things like that. So I just wanted to show you guys what came in. Once again, thank you to BP Racing. They're really making this possible. And I definitely think I want to stick with the Keyins for what I'm going to be running initially, what I'm going to continue to run on the Banshee. But we're going to run both of these carbs, and hopefully I can get this thing onto a dyno machine, and we'll see how easy it is to tune these carbs and if we can make similar power out of the replica that we get out of the Keyin. And BP Racing also hooked me up with a pancake bearing. This is a pretty essential thing. It's going to prevent our shift ball and rod from welding. You can see the pancake bearing right here. Nice little thing they threw in. And one more thing, guys. Probably didn't see this one coming. Got a dual high flow fuel petcock for our gas tank, because you guys that run Banshees know these things are starved of fuel and they're serious gas hogs, especially once you start doing big bore mods. So it's not a Pingle. It looks just like a Pingle, but this came from Vito's Performance. I'm not quite sure if it's their actual brand or if it's some kind of generic brand that Vito's rebranded, but it looks just like a Pingle. It wasn't much cheaper than a Pingle. This was $80 shipped. The Pingle's $100. So I figured I'd give this a try. It literally looks just like the Pingle, and Vito's is a good name, so why not give it a try? Alright guys, so with that, I'm going to wrap up this video. Removing your leak down system is pretty self-explanatory. You basically just loosen up all your hose clamps and pull it off. You don't have to take out the spark plugs if you don't want, but it's a really basic system. Now what you guys can expect in the future is our stator side assembly and of course our clutch side assembly. Now I'm working on possibly getting a lockout clutch setup. The reason it's taken me a little bit of time is because lockout clutch setups are really expensive, especially if you get a nice cover. You're looking at about $600 if you get, it depends what setup you go with. So I'm seeing if I can possibly get hooked up with one of those. We'll see what happens. If not, I might just end up purchasing one because this motor is going to be burning up clutches, I think. I really don't think it's wise to put this thing together, even with a heavy-duty clutch. I'd really like to throw a lockout on there. So be patient with me, guys. I got to get those parts before we can continue with the build. We can do the stator side, and I think we might be doing a shift star mod on this too, so I can throw up a video on that as well. And as always, guys, remember to give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this content. Remember to check me out on Instagram. It's MichaelSabo350. You can send in pictures of your quad or dirt bike or any projects you're working on if they're quad and dirt bike related. Also, remember to check out bpracingatv.com. I really want to give those guys a huge shout out and big thank you, because without them, like I said, guys, this couldn't be possible. They're really helping me out. So I'm really looking forward to doing this carb review. Definitely check them out, bpracingatv.com. So without further ado, I'm going to cut the video here. Until the next video, guys, enjoy your week.